The story of the Antares de la Luz cult does not begin with a ritual or a murder. It begins with a person who searched for power for a long time and eventually found it among the weak and trusting. My name is Stella, and if, like me, you're interested in dark stories, unsolved cases, and enjoy studying cults, sects, fanatics, and maniacs, subscribe to my channel, leave comments, and hit the like button. Now make yourself some fruit tea or a strong coffee, because we're about to begin. The real name of Antares de la Luz is Ramon Castillo Gaeke. He was born on December 25th, 1981, in Chile. Even his date of birth would later become part of his myth. He would claim that this was a sign and proof of his divine origin. In his youth, Castillo was not a religious fanatic. He studied, was interested in music, philosophy, Eastern practices, and alternative spirituality. In the 2000s, he actively immersed himself in New Age esotericism, meditation, concepts of higher consciousness, and cosmic light. He never had a stable job, living off odd jobs and the help of acquaintances. During this period, he began to show signs of mental instability, manic ideas, a belief in his own exceptionalism, and a distorted perception of reality. But instead of seeking treatment, he found another solution: people who were willing to listen to him. Around 2010, Castillo began calling himself Antares de la Luz, Antares of the Light. He claimed to be the incarnation of Christ, the bearer of absolute truth, and the only one capable of saving the world from its inevitable end. Importantly, this was not a classic sect with temples, symbols, or an official structure. It was a mobile group, small, closed off, and without a clear organization. This is exactly what made it dangerous and almost invisible. The group consisted of between 7 and 10 people, young adults, mostly from the middle class, with no criminal background. Among them were musicians, students, and people going through personal crises. The key factor was emotional dependence on the leader. Antares gradually isolates members from their families and friends. He convinces them that the outside world is contaminated, and any criticism is a manifestation of dark forces. Any doubts are interpreted as weakness or spiritual betrayal. Psychoactive substances are actively used within the group. This has been confirmed by the investigation. The psychedelic experience is presented as an expansion of consciousness, but in reality, it destroys the ability for critical thinking, because after such sessions, Antares proclaims new revelations that are not open for discussion. He establishes new control, determines who can communicate with whom, controls sexual relationships, decides who is pure and who is infected, and instills fear of the outside world. But by 2011, Antares is no longer just a spiritual mentor. He is the absolute authority, the source of truth, and the judge. It is during this period that a woman appears in the group, who will later give birth to a child. For ethical reasons, her name is often not fully disclosed, but the investigation will establish she was completely psychologically subordinated to the leader. Antares begins to speak about the inevitable apocalypse. The date keeps changing, but the message remains the same. The world will perish, and only the purified will survive. According to him, purification may require a sacrifice. At this stage, no one is talking about murder, but the idea of sacrifice has already been planted. So, at the beginning of 2012, the internal dynamics of the group around the Antares de la Luz cult begin to change. What was once a set of ideas about purification and the end of the world gradually shifts into a phase of concrete actions. A key trigger becomes the pregnancy of one of the group's members. The woman was in a close relationship with the leader. According to the investigation, she did not make decisions independently. All aspects of her life, her whereabouts, diet, contacts, and even her physical condition, were controlled by Antares. At first, the pregnancy was not seen as a problem. On the contrary, in the early stages, it was presented as a sign. However, as the pregnancy progressed, the leader's rhetoric changed dramatically. Antares began to claim that the child was not an ordinary human being. This is a bearer of dark energy. Her appearance is a sign of the impending apocalypse. According to the Chilean prosecutor's office, these statements were made systematically, not just once. They are repeated during meditations in altered states of consciousness, often after the use of psychoactive substances. This is important. The members of the group were not in a sober psychological state when they heard these revelations. In mid-2012, Antares forms a new doctrine. The world cannot be saved without a sacrifice. He declares that the world is on the brink of destruction. The pure ones have already been chosen. The sacrifice must be absolutely innocent, and that is precisely why it is effective. In fact, this marks a shift from abstract ideology to a concrete plan. The woman carrying the child is gradually convinced that her child does not belong to her, that she is merely a vessel. Resistance means betraying humanity. So the testimonies show there was no direct physical coercion. It was psychological pressure, built on fear, isolation, and the authority of the leader. She believed that refusing to carry out Antares' will would lead to the destruction of the world. At the same time, the group becomes increasingly isolated. They stop maintaining contact with anyone outside the circle. All movement is done together. Any attempts at doubt by individual members are immediately suppressed by collective pressure. Antares introduces the concept of spiritual contamination. According to it, doubt is equal to a manifestation of darkness, compassion is weakness, and objection is sabotage of the salvation plan. This allows the future victim to be dehumanized even before birth. The child is born in November 2012. The birth takes place outside of medical facilities without any medical supervision. This was a matter of principle. Antares declares that medicine is a tool of the old world, which will be destroyed. Immediately after the birth, he announces, "The child is the Antichrist." According to the case materials, this statement was made publicly in front of the entire group. No discussion, no alternative opinions. In fact, from this moment on, the fate of the infant was sealed. Antares declares that the child absorbs light, and its existence brings catastrophe closer. Destruction is the only way to save humanity. Preparations for the ritual begin. It was not instantaneous. It was an entire process that lasted several days, and according to some sources, even weeks. During this time, the participants are convinced of the inevitability of the sacrifice. A sense of urgency is created, and the idea that there is no more time is repeated. Importantly, not a single participant contacts the police or social services. This was not the secret of just one person. The entire group knew about the upcoming sacrifice, and no one stopped the process. A remote location in Chile is chosen for the ritual. The location is specially chosen. No witnesses, no access to help, in a natural environment that Antares called pure. It is there that the group gathers for the final stage. At this point, the decision is already irreversible. The leader does not hesitate. The group is psychologically broken. The woman is completely subdued. Next comes the ritual itself, its mechanics, the role of each participant, and the consequences that shocked even experienced investigators. So, to understand how a group of several adults came to murder an infant, it is important to make one thing clear. This was not a spontaneous act, nor was it the decision of a single person in a single moment. The Antares de la Luz cult functioned as a closed psychological system, where each participant had their own role and responsibility was diffused. Formally, Antares did not create a structure, but in reality it existed. First of all, Antares de la Luz was the absolute center, the source of truth. His words were not to be discussed. He did not ask, he informed. Second, the closest followers, 2 or 3 people who confirmed his words, pressured those who doubted, and served as amplifiers of his ideas. And third, the periphery. The rest of the participants were emotionally dependent, disoriented, and isolated from alternative information. The woman who gave birth to the child was at a lower level of the hierarchy, despite her key role in the upcoming ritual. During the investigation, it would become clear. No one tried to stop Antares. This is fundamentally important. Not a single participant contacted the police, informed relatives, reached out to doctors, or even tried to escape with the child. The reason for this is collective indoctrination. Antares imposed a simple logic. If you are against it, you are responsible for the end of the world. Thus, the fear of being responsible for the apocalypse was stronger than the fear of the law. The Chilean prosecutor's office confirmed that the group regularly used psychoactive substances. This was not an auxiliary factor, it was a tool of control. So, after such sessions, a person's critical thinking narrowed, and the leader's authority grew stronger. Any cruel idea was perceived as a revelation. Importantly, the ritual was discussed right after such sessions, which greatly simplified the decision-making process. After the tragedy, investigators determined that there had been external signs that could have led to earlier intervention. The participants abruptly withdrew from social life. Relatives of some individuals reported strange behavior. There were complaints about Antares' unstable mental state. The group frequently changed locations, but there was no formal organization. No crimes had been recorded up to that point. The state had no legal grounds to intervene, and this is a typical problem with small sects. They are too small to attract attention, and too closed off to be monitored. After the events of 2012, many were asked, "Why didn't you leave?" And the answer, repeated throughout the case materials, is fear, guilt, the belief that things are even worse outside, and a complete loss of trust in reality. This is a classic syndrome of psychological dependence on the leader, even without physical violence. After the ritual, even before the arrests, right after the murder of the infant, the group does not fall apart immediately. Some members still believe that the sacrifice was necessary. Antares does not admit to the crime and does not repent. He is convinced that he has fulfilled his mission. The world will be saved. The authorities are the dark forces that will come for him. So it is at this stage that he flees, abandoning the group to their fate. It is important to note this. Antares did not die during the ritual. He survived and tried to avoid responsibility. The events that brought an end to the sect, the cult of Antares de la Luz, took place at the end of November 2012 in a remote area of Chile, deliberately chosen due to the lack of witnesses and access to help. According to investigative materials and court documents, the decision to make a sacrifice was final. Antares de la Luz publicly declared that the infant was the Antichrist and that its existence threatened the destruction of the world. The participants were told that there was no time left. Any delay would mean catastrophe. Responsibility would fall on each of them. The child was killed during a ritual, with fire used as a means of purification. The term ritual is used by the investigation precisely because the act was collectively approved and carried out as a sacred act. No signs of spontaneity or emotional disturbance were recorded, so after this, the group did not seek help or inform the authorities. The body was completely destroyed, making a medical examination impossible. The key evidence consists only of the participants' confessions and their testimonies against each other. Immediately after the ritual, Antares leaves the scene, breaks off contact with part of the group, and begins moving around the country. The remaining participants are in a state of disorientation. Some still believe that the mission has been accomplished, while others are beginning to realize the consequences. A key point: it is from within the group that the first information emerges, which later reaches relatives and law enforcement. This did not happen instantly. Several weeks passed before an official investigation began. The Chilean prosecutor's office opens a case under the articles intentional homicide, participation in a crime, and conspiracy. Despite the absence of a body, the case is built on the consistent testimonies of the participants, digital evidence, psychological examinations, and a reconstruction of the events. Antares de la Luz is declared wanted, and in 2013, Antares flees Chile and crosses the border into Peru. He changes his appearance, has no permanent residence, and lives off odd jobs. And in 2013, he is detained by Peruvian law enforcement and extradited to Chile. During his arrest, he does not resist and does not deny his identity. During interrogations, he does not admit guilt, claims that he acts by the will of the light, shows no remorse, and is convinced that he has become a victim of dark forces. And in 2015, while in a detention center in Chile, Antares de la Luz commits suicide. Antares de la Luz took his own life. He hanged himself in his cell. His death was officially recognized as suicide. There was no trial for him. This is a crucial point. The leader of the sect did not face legal punishment. Other members of the group stood trial. The sentences varied and depended on each person's role. Some received actual prison terms for complicity, while others got suspended sentences. The court recognized the psychological influence of the leader as a mitigating circumstance, but not as a justification. The court clearly stated, this was murder, not a religious ritual. After the case, Chile reconsidered its approach to small, closed groups. The case became a teaching example for criminologists and psychologists. It is still used to analyze indoctrination without a formal sect. The main conclusion recorded in the materials: a catastrophe does not require thousands of followers, just one leader and a few people who have stopped doubting are enough. This was a very short story, but thank you for taking this journey with me. I hope that we will meet again in the next video, because I try to cover very rare sects from Europe, America, and Canada. We know that there's a lot of information about popular sects on the internet, but those small ones, where there were only 7 to 10 people, or maybe up to 50, that's still a small sect. Such materials are very rarely examined, so I want to dive as deeply as possible into this horror, and I would be grateful if you support me, subscribe to my channel, and together we will explore other terrifying stories. So take care of yourselves and your loved ones. I hope you enjoyed this and see you in the next video. Goodbye for now, and take care.